If you're like me and feel as if the money in your wallet is simply being set on fire and your paycheck just goes up in smoke, you're not alone. My name's Jeff, and welcome to Money on Fire. People that live paycheck to paycheck are defined as those of us that spend more than 95% of their household income on necessities like food, utilities, transportation, childcare, and of course, housing costs. Over 66% of us now burn through our entire paycheck before our next payday. Not because we're bad with money, but because the system is rigged against us and has been for decades. This causes us to internalize our struggles as personal failures, rather than a result of systemic exploitation. And that's exactly why Money on Fire exists. I created this channel to expose the corruption that is so bad, many people aren't even aware of how far underwater they are. And remember, you're not alone. This isn't just your struggle, because we're all in this together. And I welcome you to be part of a community where we can turn our collective energy into real unstoppable power. Because here's the truth. We outnumber the 1%, 99 to 1. But we have more power than I want you to believe. Over the next few minutes, I'll explain what's exactly changed over the years, why you feel broke no matter how hard you work, and how we can fight back. Let's get started. Let me show you what's changed over the past 40 years to illustrate just how crazy things have gotten. In 1985, the average American home cost around $82,000. Today, it's over $400,000. In 40 years, homes got over 5 times more expensive, while the average person's buying power continues to fall behind. Let that sink in. Today's down payment is more than an entire house in 1985. So in other words, what got you a deed to an entire house then, now only gets you into 360 months of debt. And by the way, the banks will make almost $500,000 in interest. Say you make $42,000 a year, the median wage. Because let's be real, most of us aren't earning a 6-figure income. If you can save 10% of your income, you'll afford that down payment in 20 years, 2045. Only able to save 5%? Hope you wait until 2065. However, that's still wishful thinking. We'll touch on that in a moment. Maybe these numbers don't mean that much to you, because you've already accepted the truth, that the average person is simply priced out of owning a house in today's world. Let's take a closer look at the rental market to get an idea of what that looks like. In 1985, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment was $385. At the end of 2024, the average rent was $1,732. The $385 rent in 1985 ate through over 50% of a worker's take-home pay after taxes. Today, however, at $1,732 a month, it now takes up 75% of an individual's take-home pay. Between the financial collapse of 2008 and the post-COVID housing crisis, corporate ownership of single-family homes has greatly increased. In fact, since 2022, there has been an acceleration of this pattern, and corporations seem to be buying 1 out of 4 single-family homes. Back in the year 2000, Wall Street firms only owned 1 out of 50 single-family rentals. These firms swooped in with all-cash offers, outbidding families by 20 to 30%. Then they converted those homes into rental properties, forever. They used software like RealPage to allegedly artificially inflate rent. These algorithmic systems also auto-file evictions at day 1 of delinquency with no human review. Because every time they start a new lease due to an eviction, it's an opportunity to raise the rent yet again. It's not personal, it's portfolio management. The reason corporate ownership is so bad for renters is corporations attract investors with growth of their investments. And the only way to show growth in profits is to, of course, increase rent. I think you get the idea with rentals. Let's talk about cars. We'll speed through this car section because I understand your time is valuable, so buckle up. Okay, the average price of a car went from $7,200 to $48,000. That's an increase of 567% or 6.7 times more expensive. The standard loan term went from 48 months to 72 months, basically 4 years to 6 years. An increase of 50% or 1.5 times longer, so 2 extra years of payments. Monthly payment was $190 a month, Now it's an insane $800 a month, up 321% or 4.2 times increase. So the core cost of a car went up about 6.7 times since 1985. That's around twice as much as the median individual income. However, the average CEO's income ballooned 12x in that time period. Individual income, $42,000 a year. Average CEO income, $28 million a year. That means a typical CEO can afford 583 average new cars in a year's wage. But we can work all year and spend every penny we make and still come up $6,000 short trying to buy just one brand new car. Also, the loan term going from 48 to 72 months is financially crushing in a couple of ways. First, you're obviously stuck with 2 extra years of payments. Then there's the issue of having to carry full coverage insurance for an additional 2 years as well. Far more expensive than the minimum coverage. And by the way, if the loan was 48 months instead of 72, that $800 payment would go up to $1,150 a month. Let's move on to wages so we can wrap up this section. So at this point, I'm sure you've already thought, well, duh, in 40 years, aren't things going to be more expensive? And that's obviously true. The point I'm trying to make here is our wages have not kept up with these increases. Not by a long shot. Even if you're in the top 80 to 99% of earners, you're still getting taken to the cleaners. Let's go back to that car analogy from a moment ago. In 1985, the minimum wage was $335 an hour, or $6,968 a year. So you could almost buy a new car on a year's wage. Remember, a new car price was only $7,200. Today, the minimum wage is $725 an hour or $15,080 a year. So you would now have to work 3 years to still not make quite enough to buy a new car. Going to the next level up. The median wage was $11,800 in 1985. Well, if you were in this class, you could afford 1.6 cars. Today, however, at $42,000, you could only afford 9/10 of a car. Then, if we move up to the top 20% of earners, in 1985, that was $55,000 a year, and that got you 7.6 cars. Not bad. However, today, with your income of $150,000 a year, that's dropped to just 3.1 cars on a year's wage. Now finally, that top tier, the CEO class. Well, that was $2.3 million in 1985, and they could afford 319 cars. Fast forward to today, as you remember, $28 million now gets you 583 cars. So 99% of us are losing ground as the 1% continue to kill it. And by the way, the minimum wage hasn't seen an increase in 16 years, since 2009. Who do the majority of these people work for? The same people who make enough money to buy over 500 cars or 66 average houses in a year. If the median wage is $42,000 a year, the middle line of U.S. income, well, that means half of us are living on less than that. Minimum wage works out to be $15,080 a year, but the federal poverty guideline considers the poverty level to be at $15,650 a year. Come on, everyone. Where's the outrage? Most of us are barely scraping by with no savings, no assets, and no shot at getting ahead. Now, let me connect the dots for you so I can explain why you feel broke no matter how hard you work. Up to this point, I've showed you how much buying power ordinary people have lost over the years. Let me show you how this works in the real world. We'll start at the top, the 1%. Here's a hypothetical budget of a family with 2 kids making $700,000 a year. That's about $30,000 a month after taxes. At this income tier, housing consumes just 1/5 of monthly take-home pay. Transportation budget accommodates for leases with premium brands, and their dining out exceeds average American monthly grocery budgets. After all expenses, including luxury housing, vehicles, dining, entertainment, and several vacations a year, this household still has $3,900 remaining each month. That's 50% more than a median American worker's monthly take-home pay. Let's contrast that with the median household income. In this example, we have a family with 2 kids and an income of $84,000 a year. That's a take-home pay of $5,250 a month after taxes. As you can see, immediately, housing eats up almost 50% of the budget, and trying to feed 4 people on $200 a week is almost a joke, with the cost of groceries now at an all-time high. So obviously, this family needs to cut back somewhere. But where do you trim the fat? Is it the $200 eating out? That's just $50 a week, which barely covers feeding 4 people at a fast food restaurant. I just feel like this is a modest budget. You need cars to get to your jobs. Is it the entertainment budget? As if this family would have the audacity to try to take their kids out to a museum or out to the movies once a month. I guess the short-term answer would be to go further in debt by subsidizing our financial shortcomings with credit cards. What if you weren't blessed with having a dual-income household? In other words, what if you chose to be single? In this last example, the minimum wage worker. Well, she makes $15,000 a year, take home of $943 a month. Let's assume you understood that having a car is just out of reach. Also, you realize you would need to live with roommates in order to afford housing. As you can see, we come up with another case of impossible math. We're just spending on the literal bare essentials forces you into the lobby of a payday loan lender. You've already given up your personal privacy by having to live with roommates, forced to take public transportation rather than having the convenience of having your own car. This is the reality for millions of Americans, and this is why we need things to change. Whether it's the median family, medium individual, or someone just now starting to enter the workforce and making minimum wage, we all need to be guaranteed a livable wage. When we follow the money, it always leads to the same places. Corporations that are making record profits, and the politicians that are becoming rich by allowing this to happen. I mentioned a couple of things in the beginning of this video, of how it would take 20 to 40 years to save up a down payment for a home. Well, now you see that's wishful thinking, because Americans have record low savings and record high debt. Also, I wanted to explain how we could fight back. This problem didn't happen overnight, and unfortunately there is no speedy solution either. But I believe Nelson Mandela was right. Education is the most powerful weapon. And as I stated before, we have the power to make the changes needed. I'm not on the left or the right, so I don't have a position to defend. I'm on the side of common sense. And you don't need much of that to see that the American dream is slipping away fast. You'll see that I'm going to call out people on both sides of the aisle and shine a spotlight on the corporations that are bleeding us dry. So I'm just getting started, and I have a lot to say. I would also love to hear what you have to say. Share your individual stories on how you've been affected in the comments below. If you could please mention the area you're from so I have an idea of what different areas are going through. Now, if you enjoy this type of content, like and subscribe. It really means a lot. Share this with others so they can see what's really going on. If you'd like to help support the channel and the cause I'm fighting for, check out the links in the description. And finally, let me leave you with this. I'm sure most of you won't know who he is, so allow me to introduce you to our Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. He's like the number 2 guy in charge of financial decisions in our government. And is he a millionaire, you may ask? Nope, he's a billionaire. I just wanted to show you how out of touch people like this are with our reality. These are the people that are in charge of making decisions about our livelihoods. So here's an interview with the All In podcast from the White House when he was toying with the idea to stop Social Security checks in an effort to find the fraudsters. And if his mother didn't get her Social Security check, she would just wait until next month. Enjoy. Until next time, thanks for watching.
I describe it to people this way. Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month.
Yeah.
A fraudster always makes the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining. And all the guys who did PayPal, like Elon knows this by heart, right? Anybody who's been in the payment system and the process system knows the easiest way to find the fraudster is to stop payments and listen.
Yeah.
Because whoever screams is the one stealing.
Yeah.
Because my mother-in-law's not calling. I mean, come on, your mother, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, they trust the government. They trust, okay, maybe it got screwed up. Big deal. They're not going to call and scream at someone. But someone who's stealing always does. So what happens is we need to get to, so the people who are getting that free money, stealing the money, inappropriately getting the money, have an inside person who's routing the money, they are going to yell and scream.